What's good, folks? Family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle Earth, to another edition of Disguise Coverage, the only podcast that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin and is presented by the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. That is One Pie Pizza, finally on my menu in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or whichever podcasting app or platform you are listening to this show on. I am your host, Anthony Prohaska. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro 2 ANT. In tonight's episode of Disguise Coverage, it's basically the end of week 1 of Buffalo Bills training camp, and there are some pieces to dive into, some pieces to analyze and focus on, especially as we kind of parse through, and this is part of what we're going to talk about in tonight's episode with my guest as well, kind of parse through what matters, what doesn't, what to kind of glean from this first week of training camp, as opposed to seeing something and overreacting. How much is too much? What are we trying to extrapolate too far with? And within all that, focusing on camp surprises, camp standouts, camp disappointments, and or letdowns, some miscellaneous stuff to go through, and it could be player-based, it could be schematic, it could be coaching staff, it could be a lot of things that we're going to dive into on tonight's episode of Disguise Coverage. And I say we because I am not alone on this episode of Disguise Coverage, which some of you fine people in the chat have already deduced based on your comments. And like I said, I'm not alone. I am joined by Mr. Bruce Nolan, who no longer is a free agent, is once again the host of the Bruce exclusive. The last couple times you were here, you were a free agent roaming those open waters, but you are kind of back home in a sense. So official congratulations on air to you for that. Thank you for taking the time. Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me. I feel like Disguise Coverage was like the disguised exclusive there for a minute, because you were so gracious to kind of have me on as an unofficial co-host there for a minute. So it was nice to have some place to hang my hat. But you know, it's nice to have a place where you can put your feet up on the table too. And I feel like I have that now with the Bruce exclusive back on the airways and back into people's eardrums. And it's good to be here.
And I appreciate you being here. And yeah, you kind of broke the internet a little bit in the podcasting apps with your return, with how high the show skyrocketed and climbed, which was genuinely awesome to see, right? Like, just, we were talking about it in the DMs and you posted some stuff about it. It was pretty awesome to see, and super well deserved. Like I told you offline, but I'll say it online as well. Yeah, you are a very popular go-to person in this space for a lot of these fans. And I think those numbers were justified, were very much deserved for you. And I'm just, now that you're back up on top, I'm just thankful that you have time for me. And, you know, because it's kind of tongue in cheek, but also joke for those who don't know, the way Bruce's recording schedule and me being on Tuesdays, previous years I was on Wednesdays. With me being on Tuesdays, we kind of run into conflicts. So I kind of meant it as a joke, but also there's some logistical issues at times because you'll be a little too busy. It doesn't align with what I got going on. We both have day job things and family things. So I do sincerely appreciate you taking the time to join me. And before we dive into the meat of it, Bruce, I want to ask you, and I mentioned it a little bit in the intro, what do you, or I guess I should say, how do you go about your process of gleaning information or notable pieces from training camp? I do like the joke that I always hear from people of like training camp flow chart time, where it's like, I see a clip, if it happened with my team, it's amazing, and this is what it's going to be. If it happens to another team, it sucks, and that player is overrated. But when we get to this time of year, people are so eager for the season to start. They're so eager to see who's doing what and how they're doing it. There is a lot of overreaction season. There is a lot of taking this one clip and this one highlight and treating it as gospel, and that's the way it's going to be going forward. And it's easy to get caught up in that for people. How do you have a process? Is there something you specifically look for come this time of year in terms of kind of, like I mentioned in the intro, parsing through things or wading through the waters and really honing in on what matters and what's potentially sustainable going forward?
In the typical Bruce fashion, I'm going to give you the most boring answer humanly possible. And that is, when and with whom someone is playing is far more important and far more predictive than how they are playing.
Okay.
So I like to watch people and say, oh, they're doing good. I love that, right? But the truth is that when and with whom is the lagging indicator of how. And we're only privy to part of how. So we get to see how someone plays, in our opinion, in a small sample size. But the coaches get to see how they're playing relative to their own expectation. And then the lagging indicator becomes the when and with whom. If someone gets a lot of run with the first team and you and I look at them and go, yeah, I think he's playing pretty well. And then the second week comes along and they're not getting nearly as much run with the first team, then guess what? Our how didn't really matter at that point. How we thought they played didn't matter because clearly the coaches saw something and went, yeah, no, we're good there. Like, we're fine.
Yeah.
So for me, I acknowledge the how, and the how is fun and I enjoy it. But the truth of the matter is, if I'm attempting to be predictive, then the answers of when and with whom are far more predictive than how. So if someone is playing really well, it doesn't matter if they're playing really well in the fourth quarter of the last preseason game. The decision's already been made, buddy. I'm sorry. Like, congratulations, you played really well. Do you remember the AJ McCarron conversation?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the greatest preseason comeback ever, and he's gone like the next day because the decision had already been made.
Yeah.
And that's just the way these things work. So for me, I acknowledge the how. I enjoy the how. I'm entertained by the how. But truthfully, the weighting I put into the how is markedly smaller than the weighting I put into the when and with whom. And spoiler alert, that's a huge chunk of the pod this week. So, roll my own show.
So then I follow up to that. How do you then deal with rookies? Because, we talk about predictive and that being one of the words you mentioned there. They have no NFL sample size. They are, we have what they did in college, but that's not necessarily indicative of who and what they will be. So when you talk about the, less of the how and more about the particulars pertaining to an individual, how do you then go about viewing rookie performances in camp and deciding kind of your thoughts on that? Or is it just like, cool, good to see, let's see what happens when bullets are live come preseason in NFL? Or do you try to go a little further, even though it's harder to be predictive with them because they have no baseline NFL sample size?
It's super fluid. Like, it's hard to explain without saying this. My eyes are liars, Anthony. Like, and all of ours are. I'm just way more willing to admit it than some. So for me, I've watched players who I thought looked amazing in practice and preseason and the NFL regular season start, and they're just not good at football.
I will still to this day defend that I think Robert Foster was a legitimate wide receiver too, who could have been a low tier one. And the injuries that next year I think derailed him. I will to this day watch those and be like, he's legit. I will not back off that.
Right. And the truth of the matter is that happens all the time. And the more teams that you familiarize yourself with, the more times you see it happen. Every single year it happens over and over. Deneric Prince was going to be the guy who usurped Isaiah Pacheco in Kansas City last year. This year it's come back around. It's like, hey, he's getting the second team reps behind Isaiah Pacheco. Clyde Edwards-Helaire might not be number 2. And what's going to happen is we're going to see it and go, oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. And then the regular season is going to come and he's going to be like a healthy scratch.
Yeah.
Or he'll be like a special teamer. We'll be like, oh, okay. It's just,
all right.
The truth of the matter is, I mean, look at the Pittsburgh Steelers against the Buffalo Bills and Kenny Pickett and the Pittsburgh Steelers lighting up the Buffalo Bills and then looking like the worst quarterback in football when the regular season came around.
The Bills got gutted in that preseason.
They got absolutely gutted. Like Kenny Pickett and the Steelers were going to the Super Bowl that year. I mean, it was unstoppable. Remember Trent Edwards going like score like 5 drives in a row and then walking off the field and everyone would be like, I mean, I don't know what else. I don't know what else we were going to do.
Here's another one too, caveat. He could have been the truth until Adrian Wilson came unblocked off that edge against the Cards and just wrecked his brain, apparently. But to your point, you get those performances like, oh my God, like the prince that was promised is here.
Right. And it happens so often. And because we're so excited about football, we just do it all again next year. It's that simple. We don't learn anything, right? We don't earn anything at all. It's just, we're just going to, hey guys, same time next year? Yeah, same time. All right, cool. Same time next year. We're just going to do it again, right? And that's fine, right? As long as we just don't get like emotionally devastated by that, then let's just enjoy having a fun, like let's just enjoy Keon Coleman, right? Yeah. Do I think for a second that the last couple of days came out mean that like we should just like write off like everything we thought about Keon Coleman before the NFL draft. No, I don't think that. But it's still fun. Let's have fun. It's supposed to be fun. Let's enjoy it. So I do think that when and with whom is more predictive than how. And I try really hard to not lean into that too much. Okay. But with rookies, it's even more fun because it's just a fresh slate and it's new shiny toys and I'm just enjoying it, but I can compartmentalize that enjoyment from the actual predictiveness. And the truth is that the how isn't super predictive. It never has been. The when and with whom has always been more predictive.
I think that's a very fair way to go about it. And I knew you would have a good logistical and scientific definition of it. So I appreciate that response. And Keon Coleman's so funny. Like I was higher on Coleman just as a prospect than a lot of Bills people, Bills fans, people who cover the Bills were. So I'm happy to see him doing well. And then I also juxtapose that with my overwhelming frustration to post something about Keon Coleman and have people come in and be like, Stephon Diggs, who told you we never needed him? We got Keon, baby. And I'm like, God.
Who is this, NFL Rookie Watch?
Oh man, that aggregate account is so representative of even a lot of people in this space. Like you see someone makes a catch and it's like, Keon's going to be the truth. And they shoot everybody to the moon.
Dominating the NFL.
Yes. Coming to week 1, he's going to be crushing this and that. This guy is destined for this. This is nowhere to go but up for this guy. And then kind of to your joke earlier, same time next year, it'll be someone else and someone else. And they just keep recycling this over hyperbolized hype that comes through for these guys. And so I love this time of year and I love the fun, kind of like, you alluded to, and just enjoying it and reveling in it, especially being there at camp for the days that I was there. And then going to the scrimmage Friday, like I love the start of football and this time of year and being able to finally see guys on the field and seeing what things look like. But I hate the two things about this time of year, the overreactions from both positive and negative, right? Guy drops a pass. He sucks. He was never supposed to be in this league. Other side, guy catches ball. He's amazing. Erect the statue right now. And then I also hate the other side of it where there's just so much like take parroting happening, which usually happens a lot. But I feel like in season, it's a little less. Draft season through training camp, it's just like parrot after parrot after parrot of like, I see someone who watches this. He said this about this player, so I'm just going to say these things, even though I have not seen any of it. I really haven't done anything on it. I have no idea. And then we get, and I just like that because we get into this situation then of hyperbolic statements and incorrect analysis, which sets unfair expectations for players, either positive or negatively. And when they don't reach those expectations, especially if there's unfair positive expectations that are established, fans get themselves all worked up and get into a tither because Robert Foster wasn't the next Randy Moss. And it just this cycle, but also I'm able to compartmentalize it and just kind of enjoy. Here we are. Football is getting closer day by day and day by day, but it is a very interesting time. So yeah, I like how you kind of parsed that and broke that down and defined that. I'm assuming we're going to get more of those definitions in tonight's episode in relation to the conversation topic that we are having. Again, if you're just joining us, and potentially if you didn't look at the title or didn't read the episode description, what Bruce and I are going to be doing tonight is diving into basically what is culminating in week 1 of Buffalo Bills training camp. And we've broken this out into 4 categories. We're each going to give our top surprises, our top standouts, our top disappointments, and then a miscellaneous category just for something you want to mention. We could have honorable mentions if people want to, if either Bruce or I want to mention something and kind of turn it into a larger discussion, but we're each going to give one. Bruce and I both speak a lot. We like to get into detail, and I want to make sure we're not here until midnight, which tends to happen with us a lot, especially on the last time. At the last time, we were like 32 minutes in, and we had just finished the first segment. So we're trying to keep it streamlined and knock all these pieces out. These pieces could be coaching related. They could be player related. It could be a specific niche segment schematically or structurally. Anything and everything is available to be said for these categories. Bruce, do you have any particular category you want to start with? You're the guest. I figured I'd let you pick the first one.
You know what? I think we should start with disappointments so that we can make sure we end on an upward trajectory. Nobody does that.
I like that.
And I want to start with disappointments.
Okay. Let's do it. Right. Let's start with disappointments. You're first. As a guest, floor is yours. I put up the banner. Take it away.
So this is really important. So disappointments, plural. Do I start with one and then you do one, or do I just bucket them all together? I think we just bucket them all together because it'll go longer if I try and do one and then you do one and then I do one and then you do one. That'll take us forever.
Wait, so you do disappointment and then I do my disappointment and then we move on to another category.
And then we move on to the other category.
Yes.
All right.
That's my thought. Yeah. So we'll do disappointments. You'll give your disappointment. I'll give mine. And then I'm going to let you pick the next topic and we'll do that for each one until all four are done and dusted and we'll send you on your way.
My two are Dwayne Carter and MVS. Okay. Now, I want to start with a caveat that specifically interior linemen without the pads coming on, it's not the same, right? But didn't stop Ed Oliver from popping up into people's notes. Fair. You know, that didn't stop that from happening. It didn't stop Von Miller. I know he's not an interior defensive lineman, but it didn't stop Von Miller from popping up in people's notes.
Smoot popped a little bit here.
Didn't stop Greg Rousseau from popping up. Dwayne Carter is a day 2 pick. He's currently, right, the 5th defensive tackle coming through the rotation because Deshaun came through first after Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones. It was Deshaun Williams and Austin Johnson. And so he's the 5th, which is fine for a rookie, right? But literally his name has not popped up in a single observation article for anything. Yeah. Which is, I mean,
someone's bound to hit it, right?
Like somebody has to pop sometime, right?
Yeah.
So that's a little disappointing for me. I don't think it really is going to matter from a House standpoint because I mentioned before that, you know, when and with whom, and he's the 3rd round pick, he's not getting cut. So it's going to be those 5, barring something insane happening. I don't see them cutting Austin Johnson. I don't see them cutting Deshaun Williams. I think Eli Anku is your practice squad guy. I think it's going to be Jones, Oliver, Johnson, Williams, and Carter, right? I will say, out of all the position groups in the NFL, do they have the most basic last name group of anybody? Jones, Oliver, Johnson, Carter, and Williams.
So it's just like, the ones who like there's 7,500 people each with that last name. Yeah.
It sounds like they're made up, right? Oh yeah, my name's Oliver Williams. Yes.
Yeah, my name's Edward Oliver.
Edward Oliver. Austin Johnson. Yes. That's my name. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Big Johnson.
Yeah, Johnson.
Right? They call me Biggie. They call me Biggie. Right? I mean, it's just like it's just made up a name. So for me, it's disappointing that he hasn't showed up at least once. I was also a huge Dwayne Carter fan, so I've been like zoned into that particular player, and I really haven't gotten much. Second one, Marquez Valdes-Scantling. And I know what they said. I know that they said, well, you know, he wasn't here when we installed some of the stuff in the spring. The reason why I gave a thumbs up to the MVS signing is not because I thought he was going to come in and be a, 900-yard receiver, but that specific element of verticality was something that I wanted to at least check off the box with somebody in the top 5 of the receiver, right? Somebody. And I know that everyone points to Curtis Samuel and says, well, he's fast. You can't simultaneously be the team's vertical threat and also the dude who lines up in the backfield as a running back. That's not a thing. So because just they're not going to do those things. And I'll tell you one of the reasons why. They don't want you to be playing a significant amount of snaps in 2 wide receiver sets, also running the longest routes, and then try and hand you the ball when you're tired.
Yeah.
That's the reason why. Yeah. They're not going to have you run a 15-yard out, a clear out route where you're sprinting full speed and then go, okay, now we're going to hand you the ball, Curtis Samuel. Like that's not what they're going to
go run between the tackles now, Curtis.
Go run between the tackles now that you're tired, right? That's probably not going to be a thing. So it's not that Curtis Samuel can't be a vertical threat. It's that you can't have your cake and eat it too simultaneously. So if he was going to be that, he wouldn't be able to be it with any sort of consistency because of the other stuff they're going to ask him to do. Not because he's incapable, right? That's just the way it works. So for me, he wasn't here when he installed a bunch of stuff. I mean, how much do you need to install to go run a slant? Like post route. I mean, just run a post route, right? I feel like I'm in Wedding Crashers, right? Where you're just screaming, hot route, hot route.
We just go stand over there, please.
I don't know what that means, okay?
We just go.
Politics and football.
Yeah, that's what Maryland
That's
does.
what Maryland does.
I love that everything about that scene in that movie. I also too, like, I wanted Vince Vaughn to get like redemption. I wanted them to play another game because everything about that scene is just amazing to me. Just, oh, Jeremy, Red Moon Doggy 11, blah blah. Yeah, we just go stand over there, please.
Just stand over there, please. So for me, that's also disappointing because he has guaranteed money on his contract. And when we signed him, I didn't say like lock, but I was like, okay, those are your top 5, right? Your top 5 are going to be Coleman, Shakir, Samuel, MVS, Mac Hollins. Those are your top 5. We're battling for 6. Now, maybe they only keep 5. They're battling for 5. So that's my disappointment because I don't buy the installation thing because you don't need to be through install to do the thing that MVS was likely going to do when he got here, right? A lot of option routes, reading a ton of coverages for MVS. I mean, were you planning on putting him in the slot and having him run option routes against linebackers? Like, was that the thing you were going to do with Marquez Valdez-Scantling? I hope not. I think I disagree with that general philosophy on how to use him, but to me, that's a disappointment. And I think it's disappointment because you were hoping he was going to add that element of verticality. And I think I don't want to say emergence, but the positivity around Keon Coleman has probably quieted down the verticality concerns. But as we mentioned before, just because he is someone who can be vertical in training camp doesn't mean he can be vertical in the regular season. I'll buy that kind of stuff if you have a wide receiver like Keon Coleman who's getting 60% of the 2 wide receiver sets week 1, then I'm buying it at that point. Now, okay. 60% of the time when they go 2 wide receivers, he's on the field. Yeah. Okay. Now it's for real. Again, when and with whom.
That's fair. For those asking in the chat, MVS this year has a cap hit of 1.35 million, but then he also has little bonuses and different things. So long story short, if he is cut, it's a dead cap hit of $2.25 $1 million for those asking in the chat.
They put void years on that deal, didn't they?
Yes, there's void years through. it's a void. I forgot that. So he signed a 1-year, $2.25 million contract, and as a void year in 2025 for $900,000, and then 2026, 2027, and 2028 each for $225,000. So he's on the books for 5 years, 4 of those being void.
Clearly they intended for him to make the team when they did that. If they didn't, they wouldn't sign him to that deal if they didn't.
No. And I will say, being there in person, the speed plays. Like he
can still run fast.
Yes, he is not some shell of himself. He's not some ghost. Like, from a speed perspective, he is as advertised. So at least he has that working for. But I will kind of piggyback off your points a little bit. Yeah, and I think even for myself, right? Some of the players I'm going to talk about in this episode, especially at that position group, have overshadowed my concern for MVS. But I was in a very similar boat where I thought the top 5 was a lock. Not in any order, but, Curtis Samuel, Keon Coleman, Mac Hollins, Shakir, MVS. And then my thought was, okay, do they keep 6? Do they keep 7? Is it just 5? If they keep 6, how much is Mac Hollins involved? Do you want to go with a bigger body? Or if Hollins is going to be an actual receiver and not just special teams, do you want more pure speed? So is it KJ Hamler? Is it Shavers? Is it Shorter? Is it Isabella? Like, all that was like what my conversation was. I thought the top 5, your point, was locked, done, and dusted. And especially knowing how much of a veteran he is and the quarterbacks he's played with. Like, I keep making that joke. Like, he went from like Aaron Rodgers to Patrick Mahomes now to Josh Allen. So he's played in schematically sound offenses with good quarterbacks and good play callers and play designers and offensive coordinators. He's been on successful teams. He's been in scenarios where, like, there's been pressure and things have been asked of him. It's not like he just came from horrible low pressure situations where, it's easy to perform there because he came from this team that sucks. Like, so I think that bothers me a little more too, knowing that I feel like he presented a known quantity in terms of play level and play style, and we haven't seen that yet. Again, but with everything, I will say, for me at least, and I know probably for you two a little as well, it is just week 1. It isn't the largest sample size, but yeah, I can see that being a concern a bit and being disappointing. I'm there with you with that. And then Carter, I've held my reservations on trench play, especially when I was there in person, just because they weren't wearing pads. And so, yeah, keeping an eye out from people these past couple days with pads, I was like, okay, who starts to emerge once the pads have come on? Because to your point, like, I don't remember anything. Granted, I wasn't completely focused on the trenches because they weren't wearing pads when I was there the 3 days that I was there. But Carter didn't like flash once for me. And I can go in my brain right now and remember a flash from Williams, from Ed Oliver, from Daquan, from Austin Johnson, even Ilianku, like at times. Like I can pull, let alone the edges, but just talking about the interior, I can pull some flashes. Carter, I got nothing. And so again, like let's see. And I already had some, I liked him. I really liked Michael Hall way better from Ohio State, but that's a conversation for another time. Like I had some concerns for him coming in just because I didn't like the way he handled double teams at Duke and how he would get blown off the ball. So part of me was already like, okay, how could he anchor? What's he going to do with from a physicality, people moving standpoint in this league against bigger, stronger, faster, more technically sound dudes? But, you know, he's leadership stuff, and he's got a great head on his shoulders, and he has had the ability to make splash plays. So I was hoping that would kind of carry or outweigh a little bit, and we have not seen that so far. He's somebody that I'll have my eyes on come preseason and especially scrimmage time as well. So yeah, I'm with you there and echoing those disappointments a little bit. For my disappointment, I went with one, carried the top one, and I feel like it's a little unfair, but I'm going to go with it. My top disappointment so far is just the back seven in terms of coverage for the defense. Granted, it's early in training camp and maybe, you know, missing Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde and everything that they did from a communication standpoint, even though Matt Milano is very strong in that area. Terrell Bernard is very strong in that area. Taron Johnson is very strong in that area, right? But, you know, maybe missing Poe and Hyde has impacted things a little bit. Maybe you're getting some new stuff from Bobby Babich to work out. Maybe the adjustments, the calls, the overall philosophy or identity or coverage structures a little bit. Maybe the offense is just beating them left and right because Allen and the pass catchers got together at points in this offseason, so they're more on the same page. But defenses traditionally at this time of year are usually ahead of offenses. And even if they're not, there's just usually more cohesion than I think we've seen. And especially for me, you know, seeing it in person at camp, for as good as the offense has largely been, and the offense has been on point. I think they've largely beaten the defense. Talking from like an overall standpoint in camp, it's been offense winning pretty much every single day. I would actually not even pretty much, I would say every single day. Granted, there's been some defensive players that have had really good reps or had standout days, and the defense has had some strong reps at times, but largely the offense has outperformed them. But for as good as the offense has been, the defense, especially on the back end, has not been up to snuff. There's been gaps in coverage. There looks like there's gaps in miscommunication. Like there's a big game that's happening, and after the play, Milano and Rapp and Douglas and Bernard are talking. Once the ones come off the field, you've got like Bernard and Rapp and Milano and other guys talking to Babich about specific aspects. You can see they're communicating, not necessarily in like a flustered or negative way, but really trying to get on the same page. And again, it's week one in camp. This does not mean the defense is going to be, you know, a bunch of ghosts this season. It does not mean the defense is on the downturn and everything is going to be bad. But I expected more. I guess maybe that's my own fault. Like knowing what this defense has been, maybe I underestimated some of the roster changes and the new coaching staff, which also factors in, right? New defensive line coach, new linebackers coach, new defensive coordinator, new cornerbacks coach, all of these pieces, right, coming through. So maybe I should be a little kinder and kind of give, you know, grade more on a curve in terms of the learning for this group. But I just expected more and less of, and I'm not expecting them to be perfect, but the ways they've been beaten and the breakdowns and, again, the gaps in coverage and communication, I'm a bit disappointed in that at this point, even though it's early on and it's a small sample size.
Training camp is net neutral, and it's really hard to keep that in mind. Training camp is net neutral. For every good play that another person makes, the other person gave up a good play.
That's right.
Like, it's just how it is, yep. Right? And so I know that the way we frame things, we try to avoid that at all times. We're always like, oh man, you know, he had perfect coverage, but hey man, perfect perfect throw beats perfect coverage, right? Well, it can't be that every rep.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It can't be that every time. At some point, someone had to have screwed up.
Oh, who did I? I did they did one-on-ones on Sunday, and I was like, man, Taron Johnson just locked up Shakir. Beautiful rep. Didn't even let Shakir off the line. He pressed him and he jammed him. And then PBU, beautiful rep from Taron. And people were commenting like, man, is Shakir cooked? Is like Shakir done? Haven't heard a lot. And I was like, God, but that's to your point. Like if, this guy faced this guy and this guy had a tremendous rep, well, that means the other guy didn't and he sucks.
I love it, man. I absolutely love it. Because I think that maybe a long time ago when I was younger and stupider, I think I would have gotten upset about that. And now I'm just like, y'all crazy. And then I just move on with my day.
Yeah.
Right.
Keep on going.
And now if someone gets, really, really really bad about it, I'll just like, well, pineapple, we move on.
There you go.
Yeah. It's fun. Okay. So we did disappointments.
Yes.
And now we should do standouts.
Okay. I've switched the banner, standouts, and this could be anything. For instance, my standout is not player-based. It is schematic-based. And also, I mentioned it in the chat, for those playing at home, joining us live, each one of these segments, feel free to flood the chat with whatever you got, your standouts. If you want to double back and hit some of your disappointments, a bunch of you did that already. But every time I switch the banner, we move on to a new segment. Please feel free to comment anything and everything you got into the chat. And also any general questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, camp-related, anything that I've seen or anything that you guys want answered in general, put it into the chat. I'm going to start it. And then once Bruce goes on his merry way, we will do our typical live question and answer segment to close out the show. But Bruce, you have picked standouts. The floor is yours. What do you got?
The first thing I want to share is that I made a Tyrell Shavers standout joke today on social media. And what I did was I said Tyrell Shavers, and then over in the right side, I put power line. And then I did the handshake emoji.
Okay.
And it was the GIF of Goofy's son, Max, doing the dance from a Goofy movie.
Okay.
Where he was dressed up like Powerline, because the name of the song was Stand Out. There were so many levels, and I was like, no one's going to like this tweet. Like, everyone's going to be like, what is Bruce smoking right now? I'm like, Tyrell Shavers, Powerline, handshake, and then I used the GIF, and it was from the song Stand Out. And I was like, there you go. So I have been banging the Tyrell Shavers drum since early in the offseason, and got a little bit of hate for that, because in my first 53-man roster projection, I projected Tyrell Shavers to make it, and people got really mad at me because of Chase Claypool.
I figured it would have been because you weren't a Justin Shorter truther.
Well, I wasn't, and there was a little of that, but it was mostly Chase Claypool, right? It was, so I said Tyrell Shavers. Now, to be fair, the other player I had making it out of the 6 was Quintez Cephas. Okay. And he lasted 2 days on the team. So we're going to ignore the thing that I got horribly wrong and focus on the thing that I'm trending toward me being a brilliant out. Sound good?
Yes, absolutely.
Sound good. Okay. All aboard. So Tyrell Shavers is the player that I'm excited about. I think that one of the things that I'm excited about with Tyrell Shavers is that if you are going to play more 12, and you might not play a lot more 12, but if you're going to trend toward playing more 12, more 22, more 21, more 13, right? Let's go 31. Let's go crazy. 3 running backs, right? Right? Full wishbone. Let's do it. Okay. So whatever you're going to do, I think that actually puts the increased pressure on the bottom of the roster wide receivers to play special teams. I think in addition, the introduction of the new kickoff rules are going to change the way that we feel about special teams. Absolutely. I know that everyone hates the idea that special teams is a tiebreaker for the 52nd, 51st, 53rd man on the roster. Yeah. And
I love that, but
and I'll level with you. I think that they kind of had a point when there was no kickoff anymore, and everyone just kicked it out of the back of the end zone. Well, it's not even a play. What does it matter?
Yeah.
Right.
Why do you care?
Well,
what if I told you?
What if I told you they are changing the whole thing? So for me, Shavers is a standout. I think that the communication from Sean McDermott is strong in favor of Shavers. And, when you get positives from Sean McDermott, it's like getting water in the desert. because he's just not going to tell you anything. He's going to give you the blandest, most nonsensical garbage when he gets up there and just the guy should be running for president, right? He really should be, right?
Yeah.
And because he can monologue for 5 minutes. You get done, you go, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, he just we have him filibuster up there.
Just filibusters the entire time. I'm convinced he has a clock set on the thing. He goes, all I have to do is just keep talking for 22 minutes and they'll let me off. I don't even have to talk about it. He's going to start reading his grocery list to us. Right? It actually might be more exciting. But
no, it wouldn't. I feel like he'd be like trail mix, oats, rice cakes, unflavored, rice cakes.
Nuts. Thank you, Bruce. And so for me, Tyrell Shavers is right there. I want to quickly hit Ray Davis, who is good at the footballs. And I tried to tell people when they drafted him that he is good at the footballs. I thought Ray Davis was a day 2 pick. I thought highly of Ray Davis coming out because the big knock on him is age, and I don't care.
Yeah, we talked about that. We run him into the ground. Not getting a second.
I don't care. Anyway. So it doesn't matter. I don't care if he's he's so old. So what? Right? And he dominated in the SEC. Like it's not like the whole age used as he was an older guy dominating. Yeah, but he was dominating 22-year-old SEC players. It's not like
on an SEC team that was not an SEC power. Like Kentucky wasn't terrible, but he wasn't doing it on Georgia and Bama. He was doing it at Kentucky.
Any benefit that he got by being slightly older was very quickly dismissed by the fact that he was playing against elite level SEC defenses on a team that's bottom of the barrel in the SEC.
No, so for me, to Kentucky, I wait for that one Bills Kentucky fan that's in the chat right now to be like, "How dare you?
How dare you?" Yes, Kentucky's a powerhouse of the SEC. So for me, we'll always have the Stevie Johnson year. You know, who was the quarterback of Kentucky that year who ended up getting undrafted by the Eagles?
The only two Kentucky quarterbacks I remember are Tim Couch and then Jared Lorenzen.
Somebody in the comment section is going to save me. Yeah. So that's my Ray Davis, good at the footballs, right? Very natural catching the ball.
Absolutely.
I mean, like my pitch in my initial podcast back was, hey, maybe James Cook isn't primed for this gigantic volume season. Maybe he's not primed for more volume. And I said, listen, this is all that has to happen. All that has to happen is for Ray Davis to be a better runner of the football than a practice squad dude and a 33-year-old guy. Like that's all that has to happen. Fair. And now if you add the fact that you actually might want to throw him passes, which you never wanted to do with Latavius Murray, right? And Ty Johnson caught like 9 passes like his entire career. Like Ty Johnson's not a guy you put in that position. And I like Ty Johnson, right? I think he's a really good third running back. I want him on the team. Yeah. But like, it's not like that's impossible.
No.
For Ray Davis, that's a pretty low bar to clear. And then all of a sudden it turns out, oh wait, he's actually good at the footballs. So for me, that's a standout. Gregory Rousseau, man, I'll tell you what, I need this more than I need my water to be cold. Like my biggest concern about this team is pass rush off the edge. It's not wide receivers.
Yeah.
And so for me, I think that the way that Gregory Rousseau was trending at the beginning of last year, before he kind of hit a wall and had some injuries, I just need to see that keep projecting. Because what happens if Gregory Rousseau turns into like a defensive end 1? Like that changes the trajectory for this. I know that's really, really high praise, right? But what if he turns into someone who's really good?
But it's also kind of possible. Like he's shown flashes of being a really strong edge rusher, despite the injuries and how that's kind of thrown him off track. And he's already one of the best run defending edges in the NFL. Like, so to your point, imagine if he puts that pass rush piece together with what he does against the run, it changes things dramatically
for this defense. And so for me, I think a lot of us were pinning our hopes on Von Miller. And I'm excited about Von Miller looking, better than he had. Right. But I mean, anything's better than what we had before, right?
I was going to say the bar is super low.
Right?
Yeah, it's just,
But I think actually the better place to hang your hat is Gregory Rousseau continuing his trajectory, because I think that based on Rousseau's age and the idea of what you thought he was when he came in, the chances of him taking a next step are probably higher than Von Miller getting back to super elite. And so for me, I'm excited about Rousseau. So for me, it's Shavers, Ray Davis, Gregory Rousseau.
Okay. I like that. And I real quick on Rousseau, Nikki had this comment. He said, does Rousseau gain 10 pounds of muscle every offseason because he gets bigger and scarier every year? Then he opens his mouth and he's super nice. Eric and I did a film room episode with Rousseau, and not only is he super nice, the intelligence that he has, everything that he was talking for a dude who is so physically dominant, like the length, the size, the strength, everything. He was talking about strike points and hand placement and what his aim is and how if he does this to this tackle, it'll make his body move this way. And on the snap, if the tackle sets like this or reaches and does this punch, that it'll make him do that. Like everything is so technical, like from a high football IQ standpoint. I'm not saying that he couldn't be that, but he's tremendously smart. He has a very, very good understanding of the game. And that's part of, to kind of piggyback with your point of hanging your hat more on him making a jump than Vaughn getting back to his old self. Not only does it change the trajectory of the team, I do think it's possible. Like he is a very self-aware player in terms of who he is, what his position entails, and how to win. It's just a matter of can he do that consistently? And part of me, maybe it's the devil's advocate I always play with myself, or maybe it's optimism. But part of me is always thinking like, man, like maybe he hasn't hit that because he's always got a busted foot or a busted ankle. Like those aren't things that you can work around. And they hurt him even more because he's not a big change of direction guy. He's not a big fluid, bendy type of dude. He's a friggin' tree. And if one of his roots are jacked up like that, that hurts him even more than somebody who's a little more athletic or a little more fluid or someone who change of direction comes easier to him. So yeah, I like that notion a lot.
The tree metaphor. You went with a tree metaphor.
I didn't plan it. It wasn't planned. It wasn't planned. And I was, even when
I'm actually more disappointed that it wasn't planned.
Oh no, it was completely organic.
I wanted it to be planned.
Even to the point of when I said, like he's a big friggin' tree. When I said the roots comment, I almost still said wheels again. But as I was speaking, I was like, no, I have to say roots because wheels don't go on a tree. It wasn't planned. Yeah. I hate myself for it, but like those things make me laugh more. So yeah. But yeah, tree metaphor. That's the disappointment. Let's go back. Let's go back a segment and see if we want to amend disappointments. Anthony's tree metaphor for camp. Just to kind of follow up on your others, Ray Davis is somebody who I'm going to speak about in one of our other segments. Even though to your point, I expected him to do well. His tape was good. He had good college tape, man. Like, didn't have elite speed, wasn't, and I've spoken about him in this way. Like, he's not elite at like any one thing. And I think that's part of the reason why he got knocked down a little bit, but he's above average to above average at a lot of stuff. And his feet are clean and precise. And the pass catching element is something that did not get talked about enough going into camp. Now it's getting more shine. But yeah, him kind of balling out has been very, very, very nice to see. And yeah, Shavers is somebody who quietly every single day puts together good reps. And you look at a dude who's, listed at 6'6", 211 pounds. And I also think the idea of something I'm going to talk about in a minute, going up with what you said, more of 12 and 2 wide receiver sets. And, if you're trying to play more power football things, having a dude on the roster who is a big wide receiver and who's physical and who has length and offers you some variability in terms of where he can align also helps him as well. And I think that conversation of, for as much as Keon's been a story and Mac Hollins has been a story, and even Samuel to a degree, the idea of Tyrell Shavers, I think, kind of usurping that last receiver spot is I think, legitimately a big one. Because I feel like if people were going to bank on anybody, even if MVS was a lock and that was the top 5, if they were keeping 6, I don't know how many people aside from you were going to name Tyrell Shavers as the 6. I think most people were hoping it was Claypool, or you have the Justin Shorter truthers. You've got KJ Hamler. I know there's people who still love Andy Isabella and want him to get a shot. I feel like Shavers was at the bottom of that totem pole. So the run that he's had and the recognition that he's getting from the staff and from people who have been at camp, very, 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 very nice to see. I like those choices from you. Like I mentioned, my standout, it is not player-based. It is schematic-based. And it's broad for the offense. It's my standout. The motions, the shifts, play action, boots, condensed formations, and reduced formational width. What they have done this year, and part of this, or this far in camp, and this goes into something I've talked about this whole offseason, follow me on Twitter, if you watch this show, reduced formational width and condensed formations, and Joe Brady doing everything he can to push all the right buttons and pull the right levers in terms of motion, shift, play action, boots, all of those things, I thought was necessary for this offense and also was in line with current NFL and league trends. And I talked about borrowing elements from the Lions and the Rams, and specifically with their condensed formations and reduced formational width, and all of this stemming from the roster construction at wide receiver, the body types and the sizes they have there, how that works in conjunction with the body types and size and frame and athleticism in the tight end room, and how if you take the tight ends and the wide receivers and put them together, you have size and you have athleticism, and you have 11 personnel groupings and 12 personnel groupings that allow you to operate both out of the spread and out of condensed looks, with the ability to pass on teams, with the ability to run the football on teams and create mismatches in a variety of ways. And it would be on Joe Brady to push those buttons and pull those levers. And so far, he's done that a lot. I said it on day one. If 95% of the reps in 7-on-7 and in team for the offense had at least one motion or one shift, including every single rep in 7-on-7, and I think the first like 9 in team. It may have been 100%, but it's hard to deal in absolutes, even though I am a fan of the Sith. I think they're just way better when it comes to the Force stuff, but we'll talk about that at another time. Just everything that we're seeing from Brady, but how that's changed from last year. So the Bills rates last year, and I know this was an excited talking point for Bills fans when Brady took over for Dorsey, but on the year last year, Buffalo Bills, 45% motion rate last year, which was 23rd. 16% play action rate, which was 14th. That gets a little clouded a little bit, though, because of RPOs. And a 4% design rollout rate, which are your boots. That was 27th in the league, right? If you break down the Dorsey weeks, 44% motion, 17% play action, 4% design rollout. The Brady weeks, 48% motion, so 4% more than the Dorsey weeks, 15% play action, so 2% less play action than Dorsey, and then 3% design rollouts, so 1% point less than the Dorsey weeks. And granted, this was not Brady's offense last year. He was merely tweaking and revamping a bit the Ken Dorsey offense, because like we've said on the show, like you said, you cannot uninstall an offense mid-year and install a new one. But despite my hopes for what they would do this year, so far it looks like just a dramatic shift. Again, this was a team towards the bottom of the league in motion rates, play action, and boots. And what we're seeing in camp is literally motion and or a shift on pretty much every single snap for the offense thus far in camp. Even if it's just a run play, they're shifting someone, they're realigning someone, they're sending a receiver in motion, and it's every type of motion. You got tear motion, you have exit motion, you got burst or that cheetah motion, jet, orbit, fake orbit and return, fake the jet and return. Like, they are hitting anything and everything when it comes to pre-snap buttons and levers. And then the width aspect as well. Again, something I've talked about a ton, the need for them to go to more condensed formations and reduce their formational width. The Bills last year finished second in highest formational width in 2023. So basically, they were one of the teams that were the most spread in 2023. And in the Ken Dorsey weeks, they had the fourth highest formational width at 26.6. In the Brady weeks in the regular season, they had the highest formational width at 27.3. And for reference, the Seahawks finished last year highest in the league at formational width at 27.1. So if you just take the Joe Brady weeks last year in the regular season of 27.3, they were the widest team last year in terms of what they did. And talked about some of the best offense in the NFL and being reduced in their formational width, the Niners and the Rams and the Dolphins and the Texans and the Lions, and why and how that ties into the Bills aspect. So I don't want to get too elongated with this conversation piece, but I wasn't expecting the shift to be so dramatic. And that's why it's a standout for me. I expected more motion. I expected more condensed formations. I expected shifts and play action and bootlegs. I expected more of that. But how much it's been, it's like he turned the dial all the way to 10 and then tried to turn it more, and it got stuck at 10 and just broke. And that's what he's been at. There is just so much that they are hitting the defense with pre-snap. And I love it, but it's just even for as much as people criticize Dorsey for not doing that stuff last year, Brady didn't lean into a ton of it either, even when he had those tweaks. Granted, now he's had the opportunity now to fully install his offense, have a full offseason as OC, and it's just been a dramatic change. There's just so much happening pre-snap in terms of who's lined up where they end up right before the snap, the motions on the snap, the motions pre. And again, it's any type of everything. It's not like, well, yeah, they're running a bunch of motion, but it's all just jet motion. No, they're hitting everything. They're pushing all those buttons and pulling those levers thus far. And it's such a standout to me because, one, I hoped for it and talked about it a lot this offseason in terms of why it needed to happen. But even with my hoping for it and expecting it, part of the reason I broke it down and wanted it to happen is because I expected it based off of, again, what they have from a personnel standpoint. But it's been significant. It has been a significant turn and shift just based off of their numbers on the whole last year with the Dorsey splits, with the Brady splits versus what they are now. It's significant. And so that's my top standout, which encompasses a lot of points, but that's the tops for me.
The stuff that we've seen so far from the Buffalo Bills offense schematically lends heavy credence to the idea that Joe Brady was operating with Ken Dorsey's playbook. And I know that we all know that intrinsically, but it really hammers home when you have a chance to install your offense and you go, wow, it doesn't look anything like that. You go, yeah, no, it's because that's not my offense.
Yeah.
I was just running the thing that the boss told me to run. But that's not how I would do it.
Yeah.
This idea that bosses and employees need to be the same is weird to me because it's not true in any other aspect of life. But yet all of a sudden with football coaches, we think it is. Well, they promoted from it within, right? Same old, same old. Are you the same as your boss? Like if your boss stopped tomorrow and retired and they promoted you, are you going to do things exactly the same?
Also, kind of within that, like, I don't think they would have kept Brady if they fired Dorsey. So
if he's the same, then yeah, like we didn't like this guy, but this same exact guy, we love this guy though.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I don't think that girl's hot, but her identical twin, she's hot. Like,
yeah.
Bro, like what
she's
so
are we, pretty.
What are we doing here? Okay. So surprises, because shockingly enough, we're behind time. So surprises. That's where we're going next, right? Because that's the only thing left to do.
Yeah, we have that, and then random miscellaneous things in the last segment. If you have
my surprise,
yes,
Cole Bishop might be ready sooner than I thought.
Oh, hope he's not hurt long term based on him having that wrap on his arm.
I hope so too. For me, it was the differential in Sean McDermott's comments about him early versus Sean McDermott's comments about him recently. When you asked Sean McDermott about Cole Bishop and he goes, well, it's important to come into camp in shape. And you go, whoa, like that's as close as Sean McDermott gets to insulting your mother. Like that's as close as it gets, right? He basically called Cole Bishop a piece of garbage because that's as bad as it gets in public for Sean McDermott is, hey, you should come to camp in shape. Like, oh my gosh, like burn, like seriously, woo, man. And then later on, a couple days later, he's like, hey, one of the things I really like is that you like to see that improvement from spring to summer. And you like to see them picking up and really master. And we're like, whoa, that turned around fast. Yeah. Like that trajectory is meaningful. And so I know wrap on the arm, and so on and so forth. And I know that they just signed Kareem Jackson, who will get suspended immediately for headhunting.
That's the first thing I thought of, the age. And I was like, he got suspended almost twice in 1 year for headhunting. Like, so I don't know.
If Taylor Rapp and Kareem Jackson end up colliding with each other on a hit, does that mean the end of the world? Like, is that what happens at that point? Like the world just ceases to exist?
That's like the final, that's the final line in the book of Revelation in the Bible that no one's read. When Kareem Jackson and Taylor Rapp collide.
Kareem Jackson and Taylor Rapp join on a tackle and the world just ceases to exist.
The Antichrist rises from there.
Thanos just snaps when they hit.
That's
right. So for me, assuming that the Cole Bishop thing does not linger for meaningful amounts of time, because Mike Edwards, week to week with a hammy, you know how hammies are. You basically just go, well, it could be a Terrell Bernard situation, but Terrell Bernard was, he came back and nobody looked good. Yeah. Like we were all like, please save us, Terrell Bernard. We gravitated toward Terrell Bernard at the end of training camp preseason last year because no one else looked good.
Yes.
And we're like, yay, Terrell Bernard, right?
Yeah, because the opposite was, no disrespect, the other choice was Tyrell Dodson, and then Dorian Williams looked completely lost, so it wasn't going to be him.
Right. Dorian Williams, like, as long as you're moving forward, you're fine, right?
Yeah.
So, like, just Dorian Williams just knew AJ Klein, right? AJ Klein, move forward and you're fine. Anything else, we got to figure it out. So for me, that's a big surprise. The change in trajectory from early Cole Bishop to most recent Cole Bishop is meaningful. Like that, I'm not used to things changing around that fast. So for me, that's my surprise.
And you know what? Sunday, he stood out for me a ton. The Bills were doing a lot of on the snap shifting, as they're ones to do, right? Disguise and coverage, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, and everything they were doing. But you can just see, and I know this probably isn't a shock, but you can just see the difference in his athleticism versus all of the other safeties. And granted, Edwards was banged up that day, but so he was you can tell he wasn't right. And he'd been banged up this offseason. The dude just hasn't been able to get together. But, Hamlin isn't just a star athlete. Rapp isn't a star athlete. And I don't think Bishop necessarily played on tape to the testing and measurables that he showed, but he's a better athlete than Rapp and Hamlin. And it showed. Watching him be in the box and spinning to the post on the snap, so fluid. So just so streamlined and efficient in his movements. And then the opposite, right? Like he's in the post pre-snap, and on the snap they're spinning and he's reading the route distribution. Like it's trips to one side and it ends up being a 4 strong, and he's reading through the route distributions and he's getting down to the running back because he's covering the flat and he takes care of it, and it's cover 3. Like even the Bills got them in motion and hit him with a fake snap, and the Bills had already rotated out of it. So he's communicating with Nicholas Morrow because they're just going to stay in that look. And then on the snap, hits a push call, reads the route distribution, closes down in the flat. He looked very good on Sunday. I hope that injury is not serious and is not long-term. I also hope if it is, no disrespect to Kareem Jackson, sign Justin Simmons or Quandre Diggs. They're both still out there. Like, I feel like I'm Will Ferrell and Zoolander. Like, I'm taking crazy pills. I don't understand why they're both still free agents. They must have ridiculous contract demands, or there's something I don't know, because I see the tape for Simmons and I see Simmons, and I watch the tape for Diggs and I see that, like, and I would take either of those guys as one of my starting safeties right now, or both. I'd sign them both and make them both the starting safeties. Like, that's what I would do right now. But yeah, hopefully Cole Bishop comes through and that injury isn't serious. And that's a good call out on what McDermott said in that turnaround. My surprise, I have multiple here kind of lumped into one. It's really the success of 3 players. I alluded to one of them earlier with Ray Davis, even though it's not a complete surprise, but the level to which he's performed. But Mac Hollins, Keon Coleman, and Ray Davis, all 3 of them in the pass game and as pass catchers, particularly with Keon Coleman, especially at this point now, as everyone's talking about, like, his athleticism is translated, right? We've seen some ball winning moments. We've seen the hands. We've seen the ability to go up and get the football and play above the rim. We've seen the body control and all that stuff. For me, it's been his work out of the slot. And even when he's outside as well, his ability to find space, read coverage, and or leverage, and pairing that along with his athleticism and seeing where he is in that regard. I did not know how far along he would be in that aspect. And I didn't necessarily think that was a bad thing, right? I think the tip of the spear for this passing attack is still Dalton Kincaid. You've got Shakir, you've got Samuel, you've got more of these known quantities, you've got the run game, and you've got Josh Allen. So even if Keon Coleman was just a physical, good blocking wide receiver who's a red zone threat, who gives you some athleticism on the outside or in the slot and in condensed looks, I was cool with that. Like, I wasn't a big, he's got to show X, Y, and Z in year 1 or he's going to be a bust. But seeing the level at which he's finding success underneath, both out of the slot and outside, and again, reading coverage, reading leverage, and doing so within the rhythm of Josh Allen's dropbacks and being a go-to for him and team, that surprised me because I just didn't expect that level of functionality from him in that technical aspect. I still do think he has to refine some aspects with his stem and his route running, which again, I think will come in time for him. But yeah, seeing how well he's performed from an IQ standpoint has just been tremendous. And dude is super smart for as much as all the talk is about him being charismatic in these offseason interviews and in that clip from the NFL draft or from the combine when he's talking with the Bills staff. The thing that always hit me was how smart he was. Like, he's talking about tape study and he's talking about scheme and structure and X's and O's and how he's adjusting and what he's reading and what he's seeing. But all of that is wrapped in this charismatic, funny package. And so the charisma and the funniness is what gets the shine. The intelligence is what stuck out to me. And you're seeing that play out a little bit already with the athleticism. And so just where he's starting at has surprised me. Mac Hollins in a very similar way as well. How many reps he's gotten with the ones, how he's being used. Like, they're sending him in motion pre-snap to be like the lead blocker on a run, or they'll send him and have him be the guy who's cutting off the back on split zone. Then they'll send him again and it ends up being return motion and they're using him to out leverage the defense horizontally, and they're getting the ball to him in the flat. The first couple days in practice, he was the first in every drill, not necessarily first in terms of best performer, but like the first to do every rep in wide receiver drills. Just all the reps that he's gotten with the ones, the targets that he's getting from Allen, the targets that he's getting from Trubisky when he runs with the twos, how much he's involved when they go 11 or they go 12, and how much he's on the field. And I thought that made sense to a degree, because even if he was just doing the Gabe Davis role from last year and the years before, he'd have value. But I think he has even more value if they go with condensed formations and reduce their formational width more, which they look to be doing thus far in camp. But he's just shown better as a pass catcher than I thought he had. And, he's shown flashes of it on tape. There's a couple really good reps with Atlanta last year where he shows subtlety and he shows nuance in his route, and where he shows a little head fake and changes his eyes, and he gets Rasul Douglas, when Douglas was with Green Bay, to bite like he's going to run outside, and he puts that foot in the ground and snaps it back inside and creates about 4 or 5 yards of separation. So he showed flashes of it, but how successful he's been as a pass catcher in terms of, similar to Coleman, finding space underneath, but also in the intermediate, being able to be that basic in on a dagger concept and finding that space inside. His size is playing, the athleticism is playing, the hands are playing. He does have legitimate special teams value, but he's shown to be a competent wide receiver in terms of being a pass catcher. Pairing that with what he is as a run blocker is absolutely tremendous. And actually, even as a pass protector, I tweeted something from his time in Oakland a couple years ago, where he's one-on-one blocking a defensive end on the front side of a bootleg for Derek Carr, and he's the front side only protector against this defensive end, and he blocks him one-on-one and literally blocks him and takes him up and allows Carr to get out the front door. It's beautiful. But yeah, just the level at which he's played as a pass catcher has surprised me a bit. Ray Davis, you talked about him. I had a good bar set for him. Like, I expected good things from him. He's surpassed that high bar that I set for him. He consistently wins out of the backfield and team in one-on-ones. And it's just the variety of what he's doing, the option routes, the angle routes, or the Texas routes, reading leverage from a defender and figuring it out if he has to pop inside or pop inside. He's winning up the seam. He's winning on rail routes. He looks extremely comfortable as a pass catcher. And again, it's not a surprise because the tape showed that at Kentucky, but to hit the ground running the way he has, similar to Keon Coleman for me, just granted, Keon showing more of things that I hadn't necessarily seen with consistency at Florida State, but the way he's hit the ground running, Ray Davis has hit the ground running, but he's just continuing to show what he was at Kentucky already in week 1 of NFL training camp. And that seamless transition he's made, he's had a couple of fumbles, which haven't been great, but he's also busted a couple big runs with the ones and the twos. He's looked very good. And again, I had a high bar set for him, but even with that high bar, he's still surprised me with what he's done and how good he looks. And I would not be surprised, to your comment earlier in this episode, if he took away not just like goal line stuff or, some of Cook's value there. I wouldn't be surprised if he ate into that snap share and we're looking at more of a timeshare and a 1A, 1B scenario than we're looking at a 1 and a 2, like potentially may have been thought, which again is understandable because Cook had a very good year last year, but Ray Davis looks like a legitimate dude who, to steal your line, is good at the footballs. And just, what he's been as a pass protector has really impressed me and surprised me as well. And for me, that's a lot because I set a high bar for him and he still cleared that high bar. So it's been tremendous. Anything else on surprises before we wrap up with our miscellaneous?
No, let's do the miscellaneous. Let's throw it all in there. I had
all right,
some,
Bruce, what do you got? Anything random, anything, everything that you want to mention? Floor is yours.
I want to talk about condensed formations because you talked about them. I missed out on like a month and a half. Like, actually, that's not true. I missed out on 3 months of conversation.
I was literally gonna say it was only a month and a half.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm able to do 3 months of conversation in a month and a half because of how incredibly efficient I am and how I don't overtalk.
Same.
So, condensed formations. So, the first thing is that the Buffalo Bills have faced and will continue to face a large amount of man coverage. One of the best ways that you can schematically say, okay, well, how are you scheming someone open? A lot of that comes from the benefits that you get from condensed formations. Gives you easier picks, easier rubs. One of the things I need you to understand is this isn't like doing backyard football. Your defender cannot always line up directly across from you in man coverage. Like, that's not how it works. So if you condense the offensive formation, the defensive formation does not condense to the same level. And because of that, you have natural leverage with many routes that you can use to scheme people open. In addition, you are now adding gaps to the run game. So this is the way you think about it. From a math standpoint, okay? It is easier for a defense to get 5 people in 5 gaps than it is for them to get 7 people in 7 gaps. It is easier for them to get 7 people in 7 gaps than it is for them to get 9 people in 9 gaps. The thing that goes wrong when the math is wrong isn't as often the offense as it is the defense. This is why you hear gap integrity all the time from defensive coordinators, because you're stressing your gap integrity, because the more gaps you add, the more likely it is that someone's going to make a mistake. Of the people who are more likely to make a mistake, it's more defense than it is offense, which means it's a little bit like playing YOLO with backup quarterbacks. So one of the things that I talk about a lot with backup quarterbacks is if I cannot get competence, at least give me variance. If I cannot get consistently high-level play, at least give me YOLO. Because if I get variance, then I have a chance to, you know, pull off something nuts. It's the same thing when it comes to math on the offensive side. If I have to introduce more variance, I want to do that on offensive side because you're more likely to screw it up than I am because I know the play and you don't. You have to react to the play. In addition, putting people in motion from condensed sets now takes those gaps and starts shifting them around. And now you have to pull off gap exchanges on the defensive side. You have to account for gaps that were not there pre-snap that are now there post-snap, which then increases the probability of you making a mistake. Now, your next question is going to be, well, then why doesn't everybody do it all the time? What are the downsides? It's harder to identify pressure. So the reason why
even coverage to a degree as well, because you've got more ways to disguise it if you present more bodies towards the line of scrimmage in that condensed spot.
The reason why Ryan Fitzpatrick wanted everything spread out is so that he could identify coverages and pressures coming quicker, because the Bills' offensive line, when Ryan Fitzpatrick here, was garbage. He made them look a lot better because he got the ball out quick. He got out the ball quick because he was able to do IDs pre-snap. He was able to do IDs pre-snap because you spread the field. So all this stuff is connected. So it's not like there's no downside. But guess what the Buffalo Bills have now that they haven't had in a while? A competent offensive line coach and defensive offensive line. You can afford to do this. It's the same reason why the Lions can afford to do this. And so for me, that's one of the things that we need to talk about when it comes to condensed formations. There is no like, well, this is just the button you press and everything goes better. But it happens to lean in to the things that the Buffalo Bills are now good at or could be good in the future. In addition, those boots that Anthony was talking about that you just never run with Josh Allen, those are way better from condensed formations. Like way better from condensed formations. And so for me, when you, okay, we're going to go down this road again. So, okay. So Sean McVay runs like 85% 11 personnel in Los Angeles, right?
Literally last year, they had a 95% 11 personnel rate. And that's with Cooper Kupp missing time.
Right. Ridiculous. It's just, it's all 11 all the time. But he has the bodies to be able to do that and still run condensed formations because he can allow his receivers to block. Do you know who didn't have the people to do that? Like, this is all tying together. Like, it's a beautiful thing. Okay. Well, they wanted to add size so they can get ball winners. No, they want to have size so they can use condensed formations and use them as blockers.
You're echoing everything I've said all off season and all these episodes. So I'm very, please
Right?
continue. I'm so happy.
It's not, oh, well, we want Keon Coleman so that we can throw the ball. No, it's not the contested catch thing. It's not that. Oh, we want Mac. No, it's not that. It's so that we can put them all in and trust them as blockers, which you can't do if your receivers are Cole Beasley and Emmanuel Sanders. Or Stephon Diggs, to that matter. It's not about what you think it's about. It's not because, well, we're going to go back to Kelvin Benjamin and Andre Holmes, and we're going to throw jump balls and contested catches, and that's the way. No, it's because they wanted to do this thing, and you can't do this thing unless you have the personnel to do this thing. You can't take advantage of the benefits, but you're going to get all the drawbacks if you try to do this with tiny receivers. That's what's happening. It's all happening in front of our eyes, and it's a beautiful painting all coming together. And I have no idea if it's going to work, but at least there's a plan.
Yeah.
And so I will take it. So all that to say, that's why condensed formations.
Yeah.
That's my miscellaneous. I hope that makes for an excellent soundbite at some point.
It should. I'm going to go back, and I've already been making notes on what to put through. Yeah, you hit so many things I've talked about this offseason. And again, like even just speaking about the Rams, that's why I talked about them borrowing from the Rams and the Lions. For as much as Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp are these really good pass-catching wide receivers, and they block like tight ends, and they're monsters as blockers. And Van Jefferson was like that before he left this year. Even Tutu Atwell, tiny little Tutu Atwell, blocks like a dog and a fiend at times. And then look at the Detroit Lions. Amon-Ra St. Brown will erase a nickel corner.
He will bury people.
Yes. He will.
Puka Nacua is a lead blocker on run plays.
Absolutely.
Like in the hole.
Puka Nacua is inserting on linebackers on duo. Like he's the lead.
That's what's happening. It's so awesome.
That's what's happening. And then Detroit, you got Amon-Ra St. Brown who can do that against nickels and safeties. The receivers with the second and third most snaps for the Detroit Lions last year, Josh Reynolds and Donovan Peoples-Jones. Big-bodied, physical dudes who can block. Josh Reynolds is inserting on duo and leading for Gibbs and for Montgomery. Josh Reynolds also, go look, the first half against the 49ers. He is erasing Bosa on the edge the entirety of the first half. The Lions are running crack toss, and he's throwing him off the line and washing him down completely. And that's not, granted, you have a leverage advantage, but it's still not easy. An edge can still run through your face, or if you take the wrong angle, they can get over you or get underneath you and cut and shave that down. That's why I've talked so much about those offenses, because now you've got these bigger body dudes like Keon and Mac Hollins. Curtis Samuel is a better blocker than he gets credit for, which Joe Brady has talked about. Khalil Shakir has improved as a blocker and gotten better. Shakir was doing work on duo last year towards the end of the season. That is that point. And then to add on to one of your pieces as well, when you've got more bodies near or attached to the line of scrimmage for the offense, more of the run game is then available to you. You can get to more from a concept standpoint in terms of zone and gap. You can marry the run and the pass better. You can get everything to look the same or similar right immediately on the post snap and then flip, and all of a sudden it's play action and the defense is completely bought into it being a run. And then, yeah, pairing it with boots and everything. It just, and again, not to bang on the drum and say that everybody who goes with reduced formational width is a better offense, but you look at the McVays and the Shanahans of the world, and then Ben Johnson, again, and you talk about their trees, the teams with the lowest formational widths, the Niners, the Rams, the Dolphins, the Texans, and the Lions last year, all coming from those McVay-Shanahan trees that are very innovative in terms of leading this league and being at the forefront of a lot of stuff. And then you have Ben Johnson, who's kind of in his own world, but is one of the hot button guys anytime anyone talks about offensive schematics and who's doing what properly. I love that you pointed out the condensed formation stuff, because I've done so many episodes on it and highlighted it and talk about it. And yeah, it really is a very important piece. My miscellaneous is a player one. I went individual. Curtis Samuel, just overall, how much he's being featured and how he's getting, and this makes sense, right? Brady had him in Carolina. He had a very good year with Brady, which I'm going to talk about briefly in this. Bring him in, you know that was a guy that Brady either advocated for or was very much on board with because of his experience with him, knows how to use him and get the best out of him. But again, just how much he's being featured and how he's getting reps at running back in team and in individual. For as much as we've talked about motion and shifts and all this stuff pre-snap, he has been the one that has been put in motion the most. He is getting lined up at the Z and in the slot, and even at running back, he's getting shifts, he's getting motion, he's getting jet stuff, he's getting return stuff, he's getting out into the route distribution. They're giving him the ball on screens and on bubbles. He's hitting stuff in the seam and on deep crossers and overs. His speed is helping and playing. His hands and athleticism are translating, and just how much he's being used and how he's being used. Again, I don't know what the target share is going to look like and if he's going to be 1,000-yard receiver and get 100 targets, but he is somebody who they are specifically designing for and scheming for already. They are using him to out-leverage the defense from a horizontal standpoint, which, again, pairs well with the condensed formation aspect. In the spread, you're filling space up with bodies pre-snap. When you go condensed, you're filling that empty space with bodies post-snap, and you've got more opportunity to work horizontally. They're using that a lot for Curtis Samuel in terms of sending him in motion to out-leverage the defense and or present looks that give you an advantageous spot in the run or pass. They're putting him on the move a ton, and it's creating opportunities for him and the offense in general. And I mentioned him playing under Joe Brady. He played under Brady in 2020. That year, amongst 87 qualifying wide receivers, Curtis Samuel was 23rd in EPA per target, 21st in yards per route run, 7th in on-target catch percentage, tied for 30th in yards per target, 25th in QB rating when targeted, and then a little ones here at the end. He was 80th in average depth of target and 68th in average depth of catch. Brady used him a ton in the underneath and low intermediate to exploit defenses. He's getting some of that now, but he's also working in more deep shots and more vertical elements downfield, and especially pairing that with the condensed looks, you create those opportunities for explosives, right? If you're mixing in the run from these condensed looks and you're hammering a team, you start to throw some motions in there, but even if you don't, and then all of a sudden now you hit that play action boot and you hit Curtis Samuel on a 30-yard crosser downfield. And maybe he generates some yards after catch because of all the open space because you sucked in the second and maybe some third-level defenders. Or maybe because you're running the ball well and you're presenting that condensed look and the defense has to honor the 12 personnel that's around the line of scrimmage or the bigger-bodied wide receivers you have that are around the line of scrimmage. Maybe they're in a single high look pre-snap, and now there's even more space between the second and third level for Samuel to generate some yards after catch. We all knew, I think, he was going to be a factor in the offense. How much of a concerted effort Brady has put in terms of putting him on the move to take advantage, or I say create an advantage for him pre-snap and set him up for success, has been a very, 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 very big thing for me. Just every single day, 7-on-7 in teams, Samuel is in motion a ton. You can tell they're really making a concerted effort to get him the ball and create open spots and open looks for him and scheme him up a little bit. Bruce, I'm going to put down the banner. Anything you want to add or speak about, feel free. If you want to say goodbye, because it is late and we have talked a lot as we are ones to do here, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to plug, whatever you want to say, the floor is yours. I appreciate you. Do what you want to do.
I would like to share something that I've been thinking about recently. I shared on my podcast last week that one of the things I've been dwelling on is that meaning is granted through finitude, right? Things are granted value because they end.
Finite, yeah.
Right? They're finite. So for me, the thing that I've been really thinking about is, do we know what leadership means? Josh Allen's leadership has been talked about a lot. And I'm going to talk about it on my pod this week, so I'm not going to spoil that. But I want everybody to think about the greatest leaders that you've met in your life and just ask yourself, stylistically, were they all the same? And what do they have in common? I think I have a joke that in corporate America, leadership means is tall and or has a loud voice. Right? That's what they mean. Oh,
and it says words like synergy.
Right. Synergy. Right. Let's just make sure we're in alignment on this. Right. I'm going to try and use corporate lingo with my wife, for 5 minutes without breaking into tears from laughing so hard. Just see how it goes. Sweetheart, I just want to circle back, if we could, on the topic regarding dinner tonight. And I just
the timeline for it.
Want to make sure we're aligned. If there's a project program that I need to be part of, I just want to make sure that we have a kind of a timeline, make sure all the interested parties, right? The internal stakeholders
Yeah.
are part of the
The
conversation.
internal stakeholders. I like that. That's good.
So for me, I think we really spiraled off when the whole Josh Allen leadership conversation came around. And I want to encourage people, like, maybe you should think about what leaders actually look like and then decide for yourself what you think that looks like. Because I think the executive leadership and the executive tone, and that was a whole conversation, the Tim Grant article and Josh Allen's leadership. And I got to be honest, I just think we have this idea of what it's supposed to look like from tone, right, to like visual. And I just don't think it's true if we think about it in terms of our own vision and the leaders that we've actually looked at. And I think that if we don't view ourselves as leaders, we don't think about it at all. That's what it boils down to. People who are or aspiring to be leaders, they read leadership books and they pay attention to leadership. People who aren't, like, in their head, it's like it doesn't even exist.
Yeah.
They just say, well, leadership.
Yeah.
So like, I would encourage us to like not say things like that until we like think about it. And so my encouragement was, there's a lot of weird stuff I saw ever since that whole Josh Allen, Tim Graham article about Terry Pagula maybe pushing a more executive tone for Josh Allen. And I was like, do any of you know what that is? Like, do any of you have like your own theories? And I'm not here to tell you what it is. I'm just saying, like, have you ever actually thought about it, or are you just reacting? And so my encouragement would be like, maybe let's define leadership before we like fly off the handle. I'm not saying it has to be my definition, but it has to be at least yours.
Yeah.
But if you can't define it, then maybe we're not in a good place to judge it.
I like that. I think that's a very good, especially in sports. I feel like that term and that word gets thrown out a ton. Oh, well, this team fizzled out in the playoffs because they lack leadership. Or it's especially it's usually used in a negative connotation. Well, this team failed because they didn't have leadership. They didn't have this. But I think oftentimes it's just used as a blanket labeling or a blanket term. And yeah, the actual like definition of it in terms of what we look. I feel like that'd be a hard thing if you're like, what does leadership look like to you? I feel like people would have to think for a little bit. They may not even have a definition of it. I like that. Well said. Well said, Bruce. We went long. I thought we were doing so good at first. I'm really shocked. Were.
We got excited about condensed formations.
We did. The excitement threw us off. We were on track in the beginning. The first two segments, we nailed it. But regardless, I had a tremendous time. I'm going to send you on your merry way. I'm going to continue and answer some questions from the chat and have a little bit more of a conversation on this Tuesday night. But I appreciate, I'm falling apart. Maybe I'm not going to continue. I appreciate you taking the time, as always, to join me, crushing it like you always do. And like I said in the beginning, very much welcome back to the podcasting space. And I'm very happy for you that the Bruce exclusive is a thing once again, as I'm sure everybody here in the chat is, and a lot of people are, as echoed by and evidenced by those numbers when you returned and what you've been doing since. But again, I appreciate you. You're fantastic. I'll see you in the DMs. Go get some sleep and get some rest. I apologize for keeping you late, as always. Thank you so much. And I appreciate the hell out of you.
No worries. My wife will completely understand when I walk out and she'll go, what took you so long? I'll be like, sweetheart, condensed formations. Oh, okay. No, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. So have a wonderful evening. Thank you to all the listeners and all the people who are in the chat engaging in this lovely conversation. I'll catch you on the flippity flip, and bye-bye.
Bye, Bruce. Oh, man. Tremendous. Also, like I mentioned earlier, like legitimately happy that Bruce is back in this space and has his platform, because his platform is so unique and so tremendous and so well done in a variety of ways. Just his knowledge, but how he goes about presenting it and who he is unique. And I hate leaning into that because I feel like you can be unique and also still not be good. But he is both. So major congratulations to Bruce for getting back on the Bruce exclusive. And thank you to him for joining. Like I mentioned earlier, I want to dive into some questions from the live chat. I've started a couple things I just want to speak about, including some condensed formation stuff. But, Bruce hit a ton of it, which kind of worked out in my favor already. But any thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, anything you've seen in camp that you have a question about, anything you've seen that you're bothered by, any of your surprises, standouts, disappointments, anything and everything you got. If you are in the live chat, if you want to put any of it into the chat, I will bring those things up now. If there's something I missed earlier, I apologize. But anything and everything you folks got, if you're still riding with me here live in this episode, throw that into the chat and we'll dive into it and talk about it as we wind down here on this show. While you folks in the chat potentially start doing that, I'm going to bring up the memo here for the sponsor of this show. I mentioned in the intro, One Pie Pizza, best pizza in Buffalo. I don't say that because they sponsor. Then I say this every week, so it probably sounds like fake or just not meaningful anymore. But I say it all the time. I did not partner with them, because of just anything and I don't say they're the best pizza in Buffalo because they sponsor the show. They sponsor the show because I think they are the best pizza. I reached out to another pizza spot on Twitter, and One Pie got back to me first. I hadn't heard of them at that point. They offered me an opportunity to kind of come in and taste what they got going on, and it was amazing, and we never looked back. A delicious sweet sauce pie, homemade blue cheese, cup and char pepperoni, a great cheese to sauce ratio. They also do catering stuff and other kinds of food like sandwiches and special kinds of mac and cheeses. They really do a ton of great stuff from a food standpoint. And they also do a lot for the community in terms of giving back and making Buffalo a better city and making the surrounding towns and suburbs better places as well. So, go treat yourself and your taste buds to some One Pie Pizza and also potentially do some good for the community as well. By just kind of going and checking them out. Again, online menu can be found in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or whichever podcasting app or platform you are listening to this show on. Oh, I like what, hold on. Let's throw out I saw a comment from RJ and it stopped me in my tracks. RJ says, I'm getting One Pie Pizza this Friday before the red and blue practice. That's the scrimmage. He said it became a tradition now. I like that. I like that a lot. That's a very good tradition. What traditions do I have for One Pie? I get One Pie on night 1 of the draft. Also night 2. I usually get One Pie for whatever opening Bills game is. So week 1, whether it's a day game, whether it's Monday night, Sunday night, whatever, I'm getting One Pie. I also get One Pie a lot in general. It's usually at least once a month on average. Or if I miss a month, the next month I'll get it 2 or 3 times. I like that. Get some One Pie before the scrimmage on Friday. Well done, RJ. Well done. Let's go back. Steve says people who use the words beta and alpha are pretty hilarious. I like that. This is a good comment from Coach Chapman saying leadership doesn't look the same from every leader. Absolutely. Leadership takes many different forms. I like that. Joe says, Ant, from your experience at camp, how was Solomon looking? I thought again, I wasn't there for pads, but in watching the unpadded practices, the athleticism plays, the juice plays, good moves. He had one, I forget. I think it was against the second team offensive line. He had a rep where I don't want to say Von Miller-esque because it evokes kind of the wrong or unfair comparisons, but Von Miller-esque from the standpoint of his jump off the ball, how smooth he was bending and dipping around the right tackle and just flattening and getting to the quarterback. It would have been a sack if the bullets were live, but it wasn't because there's no pads. I thought he's shown good quickness. I think you can see flashes of that technique. His hand usage is good in drills. I like what I've seen for him, or from him, I should say. I am interested to see him in the preseason. Again, my big thing, and I did a video breakdown of him a couple weeks ago. If you haven't checked that out, go check that out on the Cover One YouTube channel or on the Disguise Coverage playlist. I did a full film and analytics breakdown of Javon Solomon, of his tape last year from 2023 at Troy. My biggest concern with him is just how he's going to play against the size and length and sets of offensive tackles in the NFL. And we're not going to know that until we get to the preseason. I guess the scrimmage will give us a little bit of an indicator this Friday, which will be nice. But the preseason, when the Bullets are live, I think will really help. I want to see how he plays the run, even though if he makes this team and is active on game day, I don't think he's going to be asked to defend the run regularly, just given what I think the edges ahead of him are going to look like. If he's active on game day, it's to hunt on known passing downs and in known passing situations. But regardless, he is on the smaller side at being under 6'1" and being about 246 pounds. So he's under 6'1", he's under 250. How does that athleticism play? Does his overall smaller stature in terms of size and weight, is he getting chucked around? Is he able to hold his ground? Is he able to penetrate? What does he do when things kind of get in close and they cut down the space? Is he able to maintain winning with speed and athleticism and bend and mitigating the size difference between himself and offensive tackles? So once the Bullets are live, he's a dude that I'm very interested to see because he's got some really great tape at Troy. But from what I've seen thus far, I think his fluidity plays, the athleticism plays. And the hand technique and hand usage has played as well. Hard to, again, really judge pass rush plan and setups and everything, just given the unpadded nature of everything and the fact that it's like not game situations. But yeah, I think he's looked good. He's looked fluid and fast and athletic, which is nice because the Bills don't have a ton of that at the edge spot, depending on what happens with Vaughn. Follow from Joey said, and was Carter bad or just not really flashing in any exceptional way? He wasn't bad. I didn't have my eyes on him a ton. So I can't really sit there and say like I watched every rep and he was bad or he was great, but he didn't flash for me. There wasn't the guys who I saw make plays in the trenches. And again, I wasn't, grilling the trenches because they didn't have pads on, but I would watch a play get blown up and I'd look real quick and it was Ed Oliver. It was Greg Rousseau. Smoot flashed a bunch. Von Miller flashed a bunch. I see the AJ Epinesa do some stuff. I see Austin Johnson and Sean Williams. I just didn't see Carter flash in any way. So it doesn't necessarily mean he was doing bad, but I didn't see anything where I was like, oh, who blew that up? And I was like, oh, there's Carter. Oh man, who got into the backfield fast? It was Carter. I saw flashes from other people, Solomon included on the defensive line. But yeah, I just didn't see that from Mr. Carter. Chris says, any word on how Daquan Hardy has looked? Does he have a real shot at making the roster as returner / backup CB? He was in the mix for returner. He was with the initial 5 on day 1. On Sunday, there was really a main 3 that was focused at returner. It was Hamler, Hardy, and Andy Isabella, I believe. I think Hardy has a legitimate real shot at making it as a returner. Slot CB is going to be tough. He really is small from a size and frame standpoint. His technique isn't bad. The athleticism isn't bad. The speed isn't bad, but he just really is small. It's going to be hard for him to kind of live in in a Bills nickel world, given what's asked of him in terms of defending the run and defending the pass in a variety of situations. But I think he does have a real shot to make the team as a returner. And maybe even backup slot CB. It looks like Cam Lewis is kind of the number 2 in that area. And Corey Couch, somebody who I really like from Miami, a UDFA out of Miami, is getting some reps there with the 2s and 3s as well. But just if he is that returner, it gives him a shot. If he offers some mix with CB, I think there's a shot for him to make this roster. Johnny says, who would give us a vertical threat if MVS doesn't make the team, excluding Samuels, who would be used elsewhere? That's what's tough if MVS doesn't make the team. Like, I think I think Coleman is faster than he gets credit for, but he's not a burner. Matt Collins is more athletic and fast than he gets credit for, but he's not a burner. Shakir is faster than he gets credit for, but he's not a burner. If it's non-MVS, then you're really looking to add, I don't know, is it KJ Hamler? Is it Chase Claypool somehow, who hasn't looked great? I'm looking up Tyrell. Shavers isn't a burner, but he's good enough. His 40 time is a 4.59, which I think he kind of plays to. Like, he's not slow, but he's not really fast. If it's not MVS, I think you're lacking verticality. You're lacking straight line downfield speed from a stretch standpoint and from a overall stretch the defense standpoint. Oh, and Johnny, you are the one who I started earlier. You asked, what is the advantage of condensed formations? I know Bruce talked about it a bunch, but just to kind of hit those points. The advantage of it is you can marry more of the run and the pass in terms of making pass plays look like run plays, in just terms of what you can do immediately post snap and on the snap, the layers that you can add in terms of your play action game and your bootleg game, how much of the menu you can access from the run in terms of zone and gap scheme concepts. And then also, if you have the body types like the Bills do, you're able to present a mismatch for defenses in terms of fitting the run. So if they are, and just mismatches in general, but if you're a defense and you want to stay in nickel, cool. You have, those 5 DBs on the field, but the 3 wide receivers for the Bills are Curtis Samuel, Matt Collins, and Keon Coleman. All dudes who can block. Hollins and Coleman are both bigger type dudes who can potentially insert. You have a size advantage there. Does that nickel corner have to mash with one of the tight ends in some way, shape, or form? So you present the opportunity to basically have less tells for a defense in terms of diagnosing if it's going to be a run or a pass pre-snap. You can access more of the run game menu by having more bodies attached to and or closer to the line of scrimmage. You can also stress a defense more horizontally. You also have the opportunity to generate more explosives from a play action standpoint because of that marrying of the run and the pass and kind of making everything look similar in order to fool the defense and suck in defenders. The under center game to kind of get QBs into rhythm. And then also the opportunity to kind of work quickly and be in rhythm and hit things underneath. Those are some of the main ones in terms of what you're looking at in terms of advantages of condensed formations. But again, you need to have the offensive line to be able to pull it off. And to make it really work with the run, you need to have the right body types, which is why, the 49ers are one of the leaders in it. Why? Because they've got tight ends and wide receivers who are big and athletic and can function in the run and the pass. Miami has some dudes who can do that, but they have Alec Ingold, who allows them to get into a bunch of, advantageous looks and create mismatches. The Texans have, Robert Woods and Nico Collins, dudes who block their butts off and are also good pass catchers. We already talked about Detroit. And then we talked about the Rams. So again, you have the right body types and the offensive line to pull it off. You also need a quarterback who can process accurately and efficiently and be able to work quick game because there are more bodies around the line of scrimmage. Again, like Bruce talked about, a defense has the opportunity to disguise coverage or present certain blitz looks that can cause you problems. So you really have to be able to sort things out pre-snap, but also post-snap as well. But again, the main advantages are what we talked about here. Bruce hit a bunch of them, but I wanted to dive into that one more time just to really drill home on it. And not to plug anything I've done previously, but I've done a ton of episodes this offseason talking about it a ton. I did one episode in particular titled which offenses to borrow from. And I went and broke down tape on the Lions and the Rams and the Texans and broke down their condensed formations, talked about why they're advantageous, how to attack defenses, how it ties in with how the Bills have built themselves. I also talked about it in the episode I did with Mina Kimes, and the episode I did with JP Acosta earlier this offseason as well. So I've done it. It's been my biggest talking point the entirety of this offseason. And not to pat myself on the back, but if they do go condensed formations like I think they look like they are and they're doing, I want everybody to reference me because nobody has been talking about it like I have, and I want the credit for this. Where else do we go? This is a good one from Roy. Roy says, okay, and my big question, why do we drive on a parkway but park on a driveway? I was not ready for this level of philosophical debate. This is blowing my mind right now. I've never thought of this. Why do we drive on a parkway but park on a driveway? Well, I don't know. Why is Iceland mainly green and Greenland is covered in ice? It's just paradoxes and irony. I was not ready for this, especially at this point in the episode. Like, it just blew my mind. Actually, if this would have happened earlier, I probably would have just canceled the show. Dobbs said, I've noticed that they put Elam on Coleman for 2 touchdowns. Elam had great position on Coleman, but he just missed. I think that matchup is intentional. Are they planning on Elam as their press man on split defense? I think it's just kind of with how they operate on defense. You're seeing a lot of press. Actually, Eric and I talked about it in the film room a couple weeks ago. Like, Christian Benford, from a percentage standpoint, is one of the highest corners in press in the entire NFL. Douglas is in that category as well. Press is something they engage in a lot. And also, too, I think I'm not saying you think this, what I'm about to say, but I always like to talk about it. There's a difference between press versus pressing and jamming someone. Just because you're in press doesn't mean you're necessarily going to get hands on the receiver and jam him at the line. You can be in press and then on the snap, bail out. Right. And so you're in press, you're right up in their face. And then on the snap, you're bailing out. You're not getting hands on anybody. And there's also multiple, different kinds of press. You can, true press on the snap where you're getting hands, or you can do more of a soft shoe, which is where you're mirroring the wide receiver and you're staying right there in their grill, but you're just kind of mirroring what they're doing. You're using more of your feet than opposed to kind of marrying the feet with the hands. I think they're just playing. They played a lot of press last year. I think they're going to continue to play press this year. I do expect more man coverage in this defense as a whole. How much, we'll see. But I think Elam just being on those reps, it's just reflective of what they do with their corners. Now, it may be more intentional if Elam somehow gets put into the starting lineup just because of what his skill set lends itself to. But I think press is a certain element that has always been prevalent in this defense. And especially, again, Benford and Rasul Douglas are both good at it. They're physical. They're nasty. They like getting up into dudes' faces at the line. They're also good in press bail. But I do think you'll see more man coverage. I think you'll see more press man and 2-man on third downs, similar to what we see in college for a lot of good defenses like Georgia and stuff, kind of restricting the airways and the airspace for offenses. So I think you'll see more man. I think you'll see more press man. I don't think it's necessarily indicative of plans for Elam. I think it's just more indicative of the plan for the defense as a whole. Charles said, it would seem that Hamler and Hardy are fighting for a roster spot. I could see that. I could see that. Oh, Coach Chapman, I think this is about Javon Solomon. Can he bend and burst through contact without pads? Yeah. I'm just, before I really be like, yeah, he can do X, Y, and Z, I just want to see it happen with pads. I would say the bend, I would say he's using his bend and his speed and his hands to limit more contact rather than kind of bend and burst through the contact. I don't think he's going through the half man as much as he is going through an elbow or a forearm or an arm or something like that, because he's won that corner and he's able to turn and go through it. That's part of what I want to see more with pads too, right? Is kind of the surface area increases. There's more to grab. There's more to hit. How does that kind of change a little bit? So I think the bend and burst is there. Bend and burst through contact, I haven't seen a ton. But again, I chalk up a lot of that to not having the pads on it and changing a little bit. Titan says, has there been much running game since the pad went on? I think there's been a good amount of running even before the pads went on, but it definitely ratcheted up once you get the pads on a little bit. Nikki says, Edwards' hamstring might linger. I really hope Bean takes a shot and gets Simmons or Diggs, especially in a McDermott defense. I can't echo this sentiment enough. I think about this, and I'm not saying this for like a fact or a joke. I literally think about Justin Simmons and Quandre Diggs every single day. And then if Cole Bishop is hurt and Edwards is hurt, if there's anything long-term, and you know, this is no disrespect to DeMar Hamlin. This is no disrespect to Taylor Rapp or Kareem Jackson or anybody that the Bills have. I don't know how Justin Simmons or Quandre Diggs isn't on this offense. They both still have juice left in the tank. They both fit the defense. And if there's anything long-term to Edwards, or if they're going to cut Edwards and Bishop is long-term hurt, bring in one of them. Please, 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 please. I'm going to continue to say this. Charles says, Khalil Shakir is a 4.4340. That's pretty fast, and he can play through contact, just short arms. True. I just don't put, and not that Shakir is slow. I don't think he plays like a 4.43. Like that's a time that you're like, man, that dude's a burner. I don't think he's a burner. I don't think he plays like a 4.43 type of speed. And that's not necessarily a knock on him. That doesn't mean he doesn't process or he's not fast. Like a lot of the disconnect between timed speeds versus actual game speeds, a lot of that is the processing. And if you're able to play at that time speed, and if you can't process accurately and efficiently, you're going to play slower physically because the mental game is holding you up. I don't think that's true for Shakir. I just think he's one of those dudes that, you know, maybe he practiced the 40 enough, and these dudes now, like running the 40 is scientific. It's not just you line up and your speed is what your speed is. They go to camps and they go to professional facilities to train for every single event at the combine. So you've got guys now who, as soon as the season is done, they are training to run the 40. So I'm not saying that he's not a 4.43 speed, but maybe game speed is more like a 4.48 or like a 4.51 or a 4.49 or something like that. But because his form was perfect and he trained his ass off for that 40, he ran a 4.43. He's definitely not slow. I just don't think he's a burner, even though a 4.43 is a good time. Nikki says, I'm a little worried about Shakir getting buried behind the wide receivers because he's really similar to Samuel. I just think Beebe made it a point to get bigger at wide receiver. I do echo that sentiment in terms of getting bigger at wide receiver, but I think Shakir improving as a blocker last year helps him stay on the field for snaps. 2, I don't think the spread element is going to go away. 3, he's still the best option for this team out of the slot. Shakir as a receiver is the best option for this team in the slot. And he's looked good in camp. Him and Kincaid, Shakir and Kincaid are the 2 best options for the Bills out of the slot. And then I'd put Shakir 3rd and Keon Coleman 4th just because he's an unknown. But he's going to have value inside as that slot receiver and even outside a little bit, but also too because he can block. So I think I think he still has value. I think he still has value, and I don't think he's going to go away too much. Appreciate you, Johnny, saying we'll be sure to check those out. Yeah, I feel bad because I don't want to like recycle stuff. I know there's new people who haven't seen stuff before, so I want to break things down. But I know like for the people that routinely watch, I've talked about condensed formation so much and reduced formation width. Like if I was running for president, like that was my platform this offseason. I make it a point every year in the offseason to study offensively and defensively as many teams as I can. Actually, usually like league wide, I try to get to every single team, but especially the ones that are kind of the trendsetters for aspects of football offensively and defensively from a schematic standpoint or from a structure standpoint. And so that's where, studying the offenses that I studied, all of a sudden it got me. I kept noticing condensed through all these games that I was watching on the All 22. That led me down that metric and kind of went from there in terms of that film piece. Dobbs says, understood. I actually meant basic man. Thanks. But yeah, to go to your point there, Dobbs with Elam and just man in general. Yeah, I do think they'll play more man this year. I don't think it's going to become their like go-to thing just because it's so hard to live in that world in today's NFL. So I think they will be primarily a zone-based defense, but I do think you'll see more man overall from a percentage standpoint and in specific situations, especially on third down. Like I think you'll see more two-man, which is basically man coverage with two safeties over the top. I think you'll see more of that on third downs from this defense. And then also, too, when they're playing zone coverage, but when they play match zone coverage, which easiest way to explain it is, instead of just spot drop zone where you have a zone you're responsible for, and on the snap, you drop to that zone and you sit and you look for a receiver coming into it or a pass catcher coming into it. Match coverages, you have a set of rules that you are adhering to. And once a man comes into your zone, especially if it's a man match scheme, which is usually what happens, especially with the Bills, once a defender comes into your zone, you take him and you stay on him. So, one of the easiest ways to think about it, and kind of this is a good question for people in general, or a good thing for people in general, like for me personally, and I know other people subscribe to this, cover 4 and quarters are two different coverages for me. Cover 4, from a shell and a structure standpoint, they're the same. But cover 4 to me is just a spot drop coverage. And when I say spot drop, again, that means like, hey, I'm the flat defender. So on the snap, I go and I drop to the flat and I'm in the flat and I'm looking to see if anybody comes to the flat. Quarters, that flat defender will, say somebody runs a flat route. They run a little arrow route or they go like 5 yards and they go out. In the spot drop coverage, you see that guy, okay, he's in my zone. If he turns it into a wheel route, you're passing him off and you're letting him go to the coverage that's behind you in spot drop, cover 4. If you're in quarters and you're that flat defender, when that receiver is in the flat, he's yours. So even if he turns it up the sideline and wheels up the sideline, you are now staying with him and you are running with him, man for man, stride for stride. And I say that to say, I think you'll see more man coverage from the Bills this year, but a lot of the zone stuff they do, while they do mix in some spot drop stuff, a lot of what they do is also, quarters based or man match based. So they have zone coverages that are also playing out like man. So you will see man coverage, whether it's straight up regular man for man coverage or those match zone coverages that end up playing out like man, if that makes sense. K. Amori says Hyde is on speed dial. I wonder what happens with Micah Hyde. RJ says, I haven't heard much about Cook. Is he moving the same as last year? I think Cook has looked fine. He was excused from practice on Sunday for personal reasons, so I didn't see him then. But I thought he looked good on day 1 and day 2. I thought you saw the burst. You saw him working in drill, running routes. I don't think James Cook has looked bad. I just think more of the conversation has been about Ray Davis because of how good Ray Davis has looked, especially as a pass catcher. I think there's a good bar that's set for James Cook, and I think people have expectations for him. So him just kind of doing James Cook stuff isn't really notable, but there really was no bar for a lot of people for Ray Davis, especially from a large reporting scale in terms of not everybody's watching tape, so I don't think they had that baseline for Davis necessarily. Especially I feel like the common fan or the casual fan, and I don't mean that disparagingly or negative in any way, but I think Davis is dominating the running back conversation because of how well he's showing out versus expectations, where I think for Cook, there is a high bar that's set because he had a very strong year last year. And so if he's just doing good things, it's not really anything to write home about because he's already done those good things. So it's kind of more like par for the course. Dobbs says, I think about Simmons every day too. Think it into existence. I think it into existence. I'm trying to speak it into existence. I thought Simmons was going to be too expensive. So I did a lot of work on Diggs and thought he would fit financially and from a mentality standpoint in terms of coverage and fit in the run. But them both sitting there now, I just don't get it. Yeah, like, I don't know, is Simmons looking for like a 1 year, $15 million deal or something crazy that teams aren't just wanting to pay? I really don't understand how they're both free agents right now, especially Simmons. Like, and granted, teams have good safeties and there's a lot of good safeties in this league, but yeah, damn, like, if there's anything wrong with Cole Bishop long term, one of these guys have to be brought in. But then also, like, are they going to bring them in to be backups? Like, because I think both of them would start if they were on the Bills. It's wild. Joe DeRosa, who was that? Just kidding. Joe says, who were some of the specific motion piece players at the practices you went to, and how often were they running it? Samuel a ton, Mac Hollins, Kincaid was getting some shifts. Knox was getting some shifts. Shakir in some motion. A lot of it tied to running backs, Samuel and Hollins, I would say the most. And again, a lot of it being like jet motion, orbit stuff. Khalil Shakir doing the orbit stuff, but then also doing, I think he did it last year. It didn't work. Doing like he's going to orbit and then he slams on the brakes like right behind Josh Allen. Allen snaps the ball. He goes back the way he came, and then Allen tries to hit him with it. Stuff they would do with like Hardy last year that actually worked, I think, for a touchdown against the Giants or Tampa, one of those bad Dorsey games, or Denver maybe. I don't remember, something like that. But yeah, I would say mainly Samuel's getting a ton of it. Hollins is getting a ton of it. Running backs are getting a ton of shifts and a ton of motion. So mainly Samuel, Hollins, and then whoever the running backs are. And then you're getting more like shifts and stuff from other dudes. Nikki saying, has Josh been staying in the pocket better so far? Yeah, I would say so. I think there's more quick game, more stuff coming out on time and in rhythm. But also just because he knows he's not going to get hit. I don't know how much stock I'm putting in it right now in camp, because even if somebody gets through, he knows he's not going to get clocked. So he might just be staying in the pocket for the sake of getting the rep and knowing he's not going to get hit, versus when the bullets are live, he might want to evade and bail earlier on time or whatever, that kind of stuff. What else? Oh, Titan saying Hyde is a playoff edition, in my opinion. It would be interesting to see if he stays in shape for that stuff. Johnny saying it's been a rough 2 years for safety and linebacker on this team. Yeah, they've hit some stuff. For sure. Nikki saying cover 4, there's 4 DBs in coverage. Cover 2, there's 2 in man and 2 in zone. Yeah, but it's more reflective of, or is that a kind of 2 in man, 2 in zone? Cover 4 is reflective of the shell on the top. So you've got the 2 outside corners. So everybody's responsible for a fourth of the field, but you've got 4 dudes up top, like that shell on the back end. Like cover 3, you've got 3 guys on the back end. A corner has a third, another corner has a third, and then you've got the post safety in the middle who has a third. So you've got 3 on the back end. Cover 2, you've got 2 on the back end. Safety. Well, could be a corner and a safety, but whatever. But you basically only have like 2 deep who are responsible for that half. Anytime you hear like a cover and a number like cover 4, cover 1, cover 2, cover 3, it's reflective of that shell and that structure on the back end and the bodies that go with it. Joe saying, oh, some bigger frame guys too. That's fun. Knox, Kincaid, with any acceleration as blockers or off of free releases, the fun concept to think about. Absolutely. Just, again, throwing dudes in motion on the snap. We've seen the Niners do it for forever. Kittle and Juszczyk. The Dolphins do it with Alec Ingold. The Dolphins do it with Tyreek Hill. Like, just leaning into your dudes who have a mismatch advantage potentially, and then using them to further that mismatch or stress the defense and create a leverage advantage for you or a leverage disadvantage for the defense it's just a lot is being thrown at defenses, at the Bills defense right now by Joe Brady. I'm interested to see how much of that continues going forward, because there is a lot. Like, again, all that button pushing and lever pulling from Brady is great. That also means everybody has to execute. Like, it's harder to not be static pre-snap. It's easier to come out and just be like, all right, cool, we're going to be in a 2x2. You guys line up over there. You guys line up over there. You two are doing this. You three are doing this. Ready, break. Like, it's a lot harder to get everything timed out. You have to get the play in on time. Again, just logistically, you have to get the play in on time. You have to get the call out of the huddle on time. You have to get the line in time. You have to signal that motion at the right time. You have to time the snap with the motion, ID what you want to ID. There's more moving parts. And not that they're tremendously hard, but they're harder than just being static for the offense. And then even more so for the defense. Now you're forcing, anytime you put anyone in motion or you shift anyone, you are stressing communication and identification for the defense. If you do it right before the snap, the defense has to be more instantaneous with their reactions and also accurate as a unit in terms of everybody adjusting properly and in conjunction with one another, reacting to what's happening in front of them. So it just stresses the defense in a variety of ways in terms of their communication, their adjustment, their execution, being able to do it accurately, quickly, and or efficiently, and then doing it together as one unit. Because if you've got 2 out of the 3 dudes who, and I'm just making these numbers up, but if you got 2 out of 3 dudes who react in the way they need to and the one guy doesn't, that one guy could be enough to blow the whole play up, let alone if it's more than that. So, yeah, it just adds a lot. And then if you're adding motion and shifting elements to guys who could present certain matchups, you're creating a potential advantageous situation for that dude. And so someone like Kincaid or someone like Curtis Samuel, these guys who, because of their skill sets, give you the opportunity, and size and frame, give you the opportunity to present a mismatch. It's definitely fun. And again, I think Knox falls into that category as well. So very fine comment from you there, Joe. I'm going to throw up the banner here that says Toodles, folks, because we're going to wind down on this show and say goodbye. If you have not already and you're here live, please, 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 and thank you, drop a like on this video. If you have not already, likes are the lifeblood of these streams, and I hate shilling out for it and asking for them, but they mean a lot. So if you're here on YouTube watching live or watching post live later and you have not already dropped a like, please drop a like on this video right now if you would be so kind. If you're listening to this show on one of the podcasting apps or platforms, that's cool too. Please rate and review and subscribe to Disguise Coverage on whatever podcasting app or platform you're listening to this show on. If you're on YouTube, turn on notifications for Disguise Coverage. Subscribe to the Cover One channel as a whole. Tell your family and friends and loved ones about how awesome this show is. If you thought the show was terrible, tell your enemies and try and ruin their day by making them watch this show. Major, major thank you to Bruce Nolan for joining me tonight and taking time out of his busy schedule, especially now that he's back in the podcasting world. He crushed it. He was awesome. So thank you very much to Bruce. I appreciate the positive comments that are coming through from me. Thank you very much, Dobbs and RJ. Thank you very much to the sorry, I'm falling apart. Thank you very much to the live chat for riding with me here tonight, and Bruce in this episode of Disguise Coverage. I like the questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, the back and forth with each other, the back and forth with myself and Bruce, the recognition, the appreciation, all that kind of stuff. It's awesome to always see the live chat, up and at 'em and active, and especially as we get closer to football season and things start to get more real. So thank you very much to everybody who joined live. If you didn't join live and watch live, that's cool too. Thank you very much for your post live view, download, listen, whatever have you. There is no film room tomorrow night with myself and Eric. So that's not happening this week. If you have any questions, thoughts, comments, concerns for the scrimmage or during the scrimmage this Friday, I will be going to it. Hit me up on Twitter at @pro__ant. That's pro 2_ANT. Give me a follow on Twitter. DM me, hit at me, anything you want to do. If you are one of our insiders, feel free to DM me in the Discord channel. I always keep those DMs open. I'm very active in the DMs all the time there in terms of answering specific stuff and getting at certain people with whatever they need. So yeah, anything you guys want for Friday, I'll be covering it. I'll answer it during practice or after, or if you've got stuff ahead of time, get at me now so I can make a list and keep note of it, of what to watch for you folks. And yeah, that'll do it for me here in this episode of Disguise Coverage. Appreciate you folks. I will see you next week live Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern for another episode. Oh, also a schedule note. I'll be doing all of the post-game shows for every preseason game for the Buffalo Bills. So there will be disguise coverage, post-game additions for the preseason like there has been for the last 2 or 3 years, if I remember correctly. So that's a scheduling note as well. I probably will also be doing episodes on Tuesdays as well, so you'll kind of get 2 episodes a week. That's my plan as of now. We'll stay fluid and kind of see what happens. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday night. If you're on the East Coast, all 56 minutes that's left of it. I appreciate you folks. I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. Be kind to one another. Take care of one another. I will see you next week. Godspeed. And as always, go Bills.